There are faces that whisper stories before they speak, and then there is Song Hye-kyo. 4 years, her beauty told tales of longing, quiet heartbreak, and the kind of love that existed between glances. But when the glory came, everything changed. That face, once made for tenderness, became a battlefield. The eyes that once wept became still. The softness turned to frost. And the woman who had always been painted in light finally stepped into her own shadow, and it fit her perfectly. From the first moment Moon Dong-eun appeared on screen, the air around her felt colder. Her silence wasn't emptiness, it was the echo of everything she'd endured. She didn't speak to be understood, she spoke to unsettle. There was no warmth in her words, no pity in her tears, because there were none left to shed. And somehow, that restraint made her irresistible. Song Hye-kyo has always been a master of pause, the quiet between heartbeats. But in the glory, she used silence like a knife. Every gaze, every controlled breath, every still frame was loaded with rage that had been folded and refolded until it became elegance. She wasn't chasing revenge. She was composing it. Her calm was choreography, deliberate, devastating, divine. The world had seen her love, cry, and forgive across decades of dramas. But this time, forgiveness had no place in her script. The woman who once embodied gentleness now wore vengeance like silk, soft to touch, lethal underneath. The transformation wasn't loud, it was slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly beautiful. Watching her move through the corridors of pain felt like watching a ballerina perform in the ashes of her own past. Behind her performance was a quiet rebellion. 4 years, the world called Song Hye-kyo a flower, delicate, admired, protected. But flowers wilt. Ice does not. The glory was her refusal to fade. Every expression she gave seemed to whisper, "I am not what you made of me." She didn't cry for empathy, she froze it. And in doing so, she made audiences realize that vengeance could be beautiful, too. There's a scene that defines everything she became, Dong-eun standing still, facing her tormentor, her voice barely above a whisper. The air trembles, not because she's angry, but because she isn't. There's something unbearably romantic about that restraint, as if love itself had turned into discipline. The emotion is there, hidden behind her eyes, waiting for the world to notice it, and when it finally does, it feels like heartbreak and triumph at once. That's the spell of Song Hye-kyo. She doesn't act rage, she remembers it. She doesn't perform grief, she breathes it. In the glory, she became the kind of woman who can destroy you without raising her voice. The kind who can love so deeply that even revenge feels like poetry. Every time the camera caught her eyes, it was like looking into something sacred, cold, yes, but holy in its precision. The beauty of the glory was never in its violence, but in its quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after years of screaming unheard. And Song Hye-kyo carried that quiet like a crown. She didn't need long dialogues or explosive scenes, her silence was the story. Her face, so familiar for years, suddenly became unreadable. It was like watching a painting erase its own colors until only the outline of pain remained. Even off-screen, she seemed changed. The interviews were shorter, the smiles rarer. But when she did smile, it was faint, the kind that carries memory. Like someone who's finally learned to stop explaining herself. The woman who once played the beloved had now become the observer, distant, deliberate, untouchable. The audience didn't just see her, they surrendered to her. It's impossible not to think that part of the glory was personal. Maybe not in story, but in spirit. The way she looked at the world, calm, careful, and tired, felt too real to be fiction. 4 years, she'd lived under the flash of headlines and whispers, adored yet dissected. In this role, she reclaimed the narrative. She wasn't here to be adored anymore. She was here to be remembered. Her performance was a masterclass in stillness. The smallest blink, the faintest smirk, they said everything dialogue could not. You could almost feel her heartbreak in the way she stood, in the way her voice trembled just enough to remind you she wasn't made of steel, but something far stronger, self-control. She gave the world a new language of power, one spoken through silence, through elegance, through calm that bordered on cruelty. And isn't that what real revenge is? Not chaos, but composure. Not fury, but focus. Song Hye-kyo embodied that paradox perfectly, a frozen fire, a calm storm. Watching her was like standing at the edge of a volcano that would never erupt. The anticipation was the art. You couldn't look away, because you didn't want to miss the moment she might finally break. But she never did. She just stood there, magnificent and terrifying, holding the world in her stillness. After the glory, the industry changed how it saw her. The same beauty once used to sell romance had now become an emblem of emotional power. Directors began to talk about the Hye-kyo effect, that subtle intensity, that ability to say everything with almost nothing. Young actresses started studying her restraint. Fans wrote essays about her stillness. And critics, who once dismissed her softness, now called her one of the most disciplined performers of her generation. There's a quiet irony in it all. Song Hye-kyo found glory by becoming the opposite of what the title promised. The show wasn't about victory, it was about endurance. About surviving long enough to look your pain in the face and not flinch. She didn't need flames to rise, she froze, and that was enough. Her vengeance wasn't hot or loud or theatrical. It was precise. It was silent. It was art. And beneath that art was something heartbreakingly human. Because even in her coldest moments, there was sorrow behind the eyes, a flicker of the woman she used to be. You could almost feel her fighting to keep the warmth from spilling out. That's what made her performance unforgettable, the contradiction. She wasn't just acting rage, she was protecting tenderness. The audience could sense it, and that made every scene ache like unspoken love. Song Hye-kyo didn't just play Moon Dong-un, she became the embodiment of quiet retribution. Every shot of her felt like a painting, composed, tragic, breathtaking. She turned vengeance into poetry, grief into grace. And when the show ended, she left behind something more haunting than catharsis, an aftertaste of melancholy, as if her calm still lingered in the air. Maybe that's her real genius, to make stillness unforgettable. To make beauty dangerous. To turn silence into legacy. When she stood there, eyes steady, lips still, it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Not because we feared what she'd do next, but because we already knew, she didn't need to do anything. She'd already won. The glory was more than a drama, it was a requiem. For every woman who's been quiet for too long. For every heart that's learned to beat without sound. And at the center of it all stood Song Hye-kyo, frozen, beautiful, untouchable, teaching us that even in stillness, there is power. That vengeance can be graceful. That silence, when mastered, can echo louder than a scream. She didn't just reclaim her glory. She redefined it. When the cameras stopped rolling, something of Moon Dong-un remained. Song Hye-kyo would often linger on set after everyone had gone, sitting quietly in the empty classroom that had become Dong-un's cage. The lights were off, the chalk dust floating in the air like forgotten snow. Crew members said she would stay there for minutes, sometimes longer, just looking at the empty desk as if she was saying goodbye to the girl she used to be. Perhaps that was the secret of her performance. She didn't just act Dong-un's pain, she recognized it. The weariness, the dignity, the refusal to be pitied, all of it mirrored her own quiet evolution. The world saw a performance, she lived a resurrection. It's why her stillness on screen felt so personal. You could almost feel the ghosts she'd carried finally finding voice, not through words, but through calm. In the soft light of her post-glory interviews, she spoke sparingly, almost protectively, about the role. It took a lot from me, she admitted once, eyes distant. But maybe it also gave something back. That something was freedom, the right to be unreadable, to no longer perform vulnerability for applause. She had always been the woman audiences projected feelings onto. Now, she was the one withholding them, deciding who deserved to see her soul. There's a rare moment behind the scenes where she breaks character. She laughs, not Dong-un's bitter half-smile, but her own. It's fleeting, gentle, and real. Watching it feels almost intrusive, like catching a glimpse of the woman behind the armor. And then, as if remembering the weight of the role, she exhales, and the laughter fades. The mask returns. That's how deeply the character lived within her. When the glory ended, many wondered if she'd return to romance, to the light, to the warmth. But how do you return after you've touched something this dark and beautiful? Song Hye-kyo didn't just act vengeance, She embodied restraint so profound it became art. Her next roles will no doubt carry traces of that stillness, that measured breath between pain and peace. Because once an actress finds truth that raw, she never quite goes back. The world calls her frozen beauty, but maybe that's a misunderstanding. The ice wasn't coldness, it was preservation. The only way to hold the shape of pain without letting it destroy her. Beneath that calm exterior was someone burning quietly, just enough to keep the frost from cracking. That balance, between fire and ice, grief and grace, is what made her performance unforgettable. Fans still revisit those moments, the long silences, the trembling eyelids, the slow turn of her head, trying to decode what she was really feeling. But that's the thing about Song Hye-kyo, she never gives everything away. The mystery is part of the message. You can look into her eyes for an entire scene and still not be sure if you're seeing vengeance or sorrow. Maybe both. Maybe that's the point. The glory ended with calm, not chaos. No explosion, no scream, just a quiet exhale, a walk into the sunlight. It was the perfect ending for an actress who built power through pause. The camera may have stopped, but the silence she left behind still hums in every viewer who watched her reclaim her narrative one still breath at a time. Because that's what Song Hye-kyo taught us, that real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it simply endures. Sometimes, it looks at the world with tearless eyes and says, I survived. And in that survival, in that breathtaking calm, she found her glory.